Welcome back to the Raising Rock podcast. I'm Elise and I am your host. Today we are joined by Andrew Buck from the Freedom Fight. If you are facing a porn exposure in your home with your child, this is the episode for you. We dig into not just how to prevent your child from seeing porn, but what to do when your child has actually been exposed to porn. Andrew, welcome to the show. Andrew, you were first exposed to pornography at the age of 11. And I hear the statistic all the time. The average child first is exposed to porn between 8 and 11, 9 and 11, whatever that age range is. But I think as parents, we all hear that and go, yeah. Like, come on. Like, that's not going to happen. It happened to you. Walk me back to that day. Why was that moment so significant in your life?
That's exactly right. And I didn't really think much of it at the time when I was 11. Right. I had just been given a iPod Touch. So my generation is actually the first generation with high-speed internet at the prime time of age exposure to get access to high-speed pornography. And so I was at school, someone was just making a gesture or a comment, and I was just curious. And I had basically what's now an iPhone, but that couldn't make phone calls. And that really plunged me into the realm of just curiosity. For me, it wasn't opening a dictionary like it used to be, right? It was Googling what something was. And that, 2 clicks later, I've seen now this new realm of things I knew deep down in my heart probably shouldn't be looking at, but didn't have a deep conviction. I didn't grow up as a Christian, whereas really the stats are the same, though, for kids that are in our of exposures. So that's not that big of a factor in terms of that piece. But I just kept using out of curiosity and this taboo thing that I didn't want to show anyone, was kind of hiding from people with. And it was just kind of didn't tell anyone about it and really just started consuming pornography. It wasn't every day, but several times a week when I was first exposed, and that would have been in 6th grade or middle school. So that really what's kicked off my soon-to-be really deep struggle and addiction with pornography.
So it went from, I hear something at school, I'm curious what it means, I Google it, to now I look at it a couple days a week. What was the progression from that, the couple days a week, to full-blown pornography addiction? And when was the age that you were addicted to pornography?
So middle school, a few times a week, maybe just once a week, really out of curiosity or just out of boredom per se. And then developing into high school, that's when it became much more of a kind of an idolized thing in my life of, okay, hey, I'm going to start adjusting my schedule, making time for. I think those are some really good indicators of when, that struggle is becoming a really habitual habit, or, we might call it addiction, is some of that pre-planning for those types of things. And so that was true for me in high school around sports, big sporting outings, or, big tests or things around that, feeling stressed or feeling these other emotions that was then begin to medicate with pornography, which again, I could never express those things back then, but now knowing after my just history and the nature of my work, understand there's a lot of these life events happening in my life that are causing me these emotions and didn't know how to deal with them. And this was something that was safe, that made me feel good, that was, was really readily available whenever I wanted it. And so that was the thing I would run to when I would feel those things.
When was it illuminated for you, or when did someone find out and say, hey, I think you have a problem with this? Like, what was the process from I'm using this to deal and cope with life to, okay, we've got an issue here?
Yeah, so it was really in college where that's when I began becoming discipled, and I gave my life to Christ my freshman year, kind of over winter break. And that's when I was actually at a conference and went to a breakout that was just about pornography. It was a Christian conference, and it was about it. I looked at some brain scans, and I just saw the actual differences of someone who's on actual meth versus someone who's on pornography. How some of these brain scans are looking worse for the person on pornography just because of the havoc it's actually having on your brain. It's pretty that really kind of shocked the system for me. And I still wasn't a believer at that time when I saw that. And that was actually something that kind of propelled me into eventually coming to faith, was just how do I even deal with the struggle? Because I just knew at that point I didn't want it in my life. But it was also accompanied that with a guy who would lead me to faith that really challenged me in this area after I came to be a Christian, that of just setting the bar high of, hey, as Christians, as believers, we're called to walk in holiness, which just means to be set apart from the world, right? And God is calling us to purity, right? 1 Corinthians 6:18, flee from sexual immorality, right? All our sins are outside the body. Whoever sins sexually sins against their own body. It's like, man, we are called to not have this in our life. That's just God's standard. And yeah, I wasn't experiencing that when I first came to faith, and I didn't really know as a new believer that the seriousness of it. And so him challenging me, discipling me, leading me through that is really what propelled me, but also is what caused me actually beginning to try to find freedom, was what really propelled it to kind of a deep, one of the harder kind of months of my life, was feeling so much guilt and shame because I'm reading about the power of sin in my life, but I'm not experiencing it, right? And so that really was a difficult few months for me as I was trying to kind of wrestle this on my own, and just experiencing a tremendous amount of that guilt and shame, and just feeling like a hypocrite and, man, doubting my faith. Is it real? Like, I'm reading that I shouldn't be doing this, but man, I'm not seeing any victory in this area.
You mentioned brain scans. I want to park there for a second because I've heard that, but I've not been educated much on that. Talk to us about what pornography does to the brain.
Yeah, and I'm not a neuroscientist or anything, but just through the literature, a couple of just really basic functions of someone who's using pornography and how it impacts your brain is it's really hijacking the brain reward system. So the dopamine that you're experiencing, which is just a pleasure chemical, it's what God's designed for us to want to remember and repeat things. And so let's say I spend some really good time with friends or family, I go on a walk, have a really good meal. Those are all dopamine causing things that make it's like, hey, those are good, let's repeat those. So insert pornography is off the charts, right? And the only thing that's higher than dopamine release than pornography is, hard drugs, which is like meth or coke, or just things like that. And so when a person is using pornography regularly, what it's doing is it's increasing the dopamine thresholds that are required to make you feel good. Porn addict is chasing a very similar high as some other drug addict, and that's why it can become so addictive so quickly, is because of just how some of that brain works. And so those brain scans, what it's doing is it's measuring oxygen and blood flow, right? So when you look at it, it looks like there's holes in your brain. So there's not actually holes, but it's showing what parts of the brain are being used. And one of the biggest impacts is the front part of your brain, which is the prefrontal cortex. And so that's your decision making. That's kind of the brakes. That's why before, like, you couldn't rent a car till being 25, was because they didn't trust you with their car. And so that's actually being impacted, becomes less effective while someone is using pornography for extended amounts of time. And so that's kind of just a really crash course on some of how that works.
I think that's really important for the listener to understand and wrap their head around, because so much of what we do at Raising Rock is equipping parents how to talk to their kids about pornography or how to talk to your kids about whatever the topic is. And we've covered a lot on how to talk to your kids about pornography and preparing them for, it's not if you're going to see it, it's when you're going to see it, and come talk to me and all the things, right? But I think there's a really tangible lesson there of when we're talking to our kids, of talking about what it does to your brain and the impact it has on the brain, like drugs, like whatever. And so I think that's really important. If you're listening to this episode, like, rewind really quick, jot some of that down, and get comfortable sharing that with your children, because that is an important piece that they understand. If this will impact your brain like drugs will. This is why it's so important. I mean, for so many other reasons, but it'll impact your brain like drugs will.
Yeah, and just something to add even to that, of just And the promise of God is just so great. And, science is just now catching up to what, really what Scripture's promised over the last, over 2,000 years is, Romans 12:2 says, do not conform to the pattern of this world, right? It's a really great argument that one of the patterns of this world is sexual immorality, right? Pornography, sex addiction is in general. So do not be conformed to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. And we're seeing that is as people begin to detox, begin to find freedom. So after about 6 months, the brain actually begins to heal itself, the neuroplasticity, all those things. And so we're seeing just how Scripture's so true, and that there's a lot of hope really in that. And so once just because you've been struggling with pornography doesn't mean that you can't heal and you can't move forward through that, and your brain can't return back to normal. And so those are two really good things. And last just thought on that is just the addiction can kind of be a thrown out word in a lot of places, and understanding that pornography can be an addiction does not excuse our sin, right? But it does help explain how someone can both love God and still struggle with trying to find freedom, and still struggle with relapses after, getting in a group and doing all the right things, because there is consequence for our sin. And, for me, 8 years of just watching pornography every single week for that chunk of time had an impact, and I had to work through the deeper roots of the addiction. It wasn't as simple as just for me to try harder and pray harder. There was some really formational things I had to start going through.
And what were those formational things that you had to walk through?
Yeah, so first was I was encouraged to join a small group. So the campus ministry I was involved with at colleges took this very seriously. And it's what actually where the Freedom Fight, which is who I work for, it was birthed out of, was to solve this issue of there was more and more men. Back in 2007, it was like 20% of men were disqualified for leadership in their ministry because of pornography, and I thought it was really bad then. And now, fast forward to today, 90% of college students as they come in are, watching pornography, monthly or more.
90%.
Yeah, exactly.
You said monthly or more? 90% of men in college are watching pornography monthly or more.
Yeah, it's
wow.
I don't even ask if they are watching or not, or like I just ask them, hey, how'd you address this struggle, because they're all doing it. And so the Barna stats I have in here said 78% are watching porn. That's just general. That's for all practicing men. The youngest population is, they would say, 83%. So that 90% is a little high, but for the year, it's for sure that. The big impact here too is it's not just men though. The fastest growing percentage is actually in women. And that's
just hit such a hot button for me, and I don't even know if you know this or not, but I had a huge struggle with reading erotic novels, and nobody calls it what it is. It is pornography.
Yeah.
And the Lord delivered me from it, and thank God it wasn't like a massive, massive battle for many, many, many years, but it was longer than it should have been.
Yeah.
And I had to call it what it was. And I've done other episodes on it. If you're a new listener, go back. It's an episode about, you can just search romance novels and it'll pull up. But that is such a chokehold on our society right now for women, is romantic erotic novels, and they are pornography. Pornography is not just visual, guys. It is written. You can read pornography.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's really sad, but it's just the reality where we're at. We can't change the truth of what's happening. Is 73% of 18 to 27-year-old women admit to watching porn. Now that's not every day, but that's enough for them to say that that they're watching porn at a frequency enough per year. And so it really is such we would say it's a pervasive issue. It's impacting so many people that it's not a if, like what you guys say, but it's a when this is going to happen with your kids. And then realistically, there's a great chance that a lot of people listening, their kids are struggling with it. They might have not told them. Maybe they have. We had a mom call in when we were on a radio thing with and they said that she had a 10-year-old daughter. She was on the computer playing a game, she said, and the mom went and checked the history. and found what she would say was hardcore pornography. And so she approached the daughter and asked her, and she says, "Mom, I've been viewing this for a year. I don't want to see it anymore, but I can't stop." That's just the reality of what's happening. That's not every single kid by any means, but I mean, that was true for me. I was watching hardcore pornography for, 8 years growing up, and was a very high functioning kid, got great grades, was involved with sports, doing all the things. So from the outside, it all looks great, but man, the inside, just the addictive nature, how pornography is targeting kids, we really have to learn how to address this, because it's going to happen. Maybe not in your kids' lives, but at least with someone that they know.
Well, statistically, probably in our kids' life.
Exactly. Yeah.
Unfortunately, like, I would love to say that the work that we're doing with our children is going to protect them from that, but statistically, they'll struggle with it, or they'll be exposed to it at a minimum. And I hate saying that out loud because I don't want to succumb to a battle that, like, we haven't faced yet. But I think parents need to think of it in that way. Like, statistically, our children will at a minimum be exposed to it, if not regularly deal with it. So how do we navigate that? And so my question for you, and I have a ton that I want to pick through, but I want to start with, let's look at this 10-year-old little girl, for an example. You realize that your 10-year-old is struggling with a pornography addiction. What do you do?
Yeah, that's a great question, and there's several different really good options. So first is getting educated yourself, right? So doing podcasts or going through materials. Those are really great starting points. Understanding kind of what kind of struggle, how deep is it, what's the frequency, how are they doing? A couple just immediate steps. All right, hey, let's lock up. Maybe your house isn't very locked up, or maybe they have a smart device. Considering, there's so many different angles with that of, hey, how can we limit access just to protect them as best we can, to detox, right? To get them off to do those things. The other piece is going to be, okay, addressing the why, going through some material. So, for Freedom Fight, we have something called a 30-day challenge. It's free. You can create an account on we have an app, bunch of stuff. If they're watching pornography, there's nothing in the Freedom Fight that's going to be something they shouldn't be looking at. We do tell the truth. We're going through a lot of stuff, but there's nothing that they haven't been exposed to by watching pornography that they're going to see, and that kind of content, even though a 10-year-old be a little bit, younger on the spectrum there. But really starting with the parenting discipleship piece is so huge. Is the faster you can do that with them is going to be the best option. You guys have talked a lot about de-shaming the topic and talking about it frequently. So if you're doing those things and they approach you and they admit it, those are all. We need to encourage them. We need to just thank them for their honesty and confessing, and for bring this up, and then really locking arms with them and walking through it with them in a non-shaming way. And so those are just a couple things that could be really helpful. Other things that are great is, if there is some peer accountability. It's a 10-year-old's a little bit on the younger spectrum of that.
Or 13-year-old, 15, whatever. I just chose that because we had just chatted about that gal, but
yeah,
pick a number, 13, 15, 16.
Yeah, so middle school going into high school is kind of prime for youth groups that, again, statistically, most of them are struggling. The issue with it is confidentiality, right? What is kind of something we want to try to avoid is your kid confesses or shares something with their friends, and then they go and tell people at school or something, right? That's an unfortunate scenario that can happen. And so there's some practices that churches can take, or youth pastors. We actually have a kind of a youth document for pastors that helps walk through these things if they are doing those. But I would say my primary recommendation is the household discipleship, right? And so it's, hey, your husband or the dad is, hey, let's talk. We're going to start talking about this regularly, and not in a shaming way, and not in a trying to catch you in the act type of way, but in a locking arms together. And I want to help you, and we're going to do everything we can to share the truth and go through scripture. We're going to, practice some tools that, we teach a few that it's like a breathing exercise. So we call it brace. You breathe deeply for 4 seconds. You're getting oxygen back to your brain. You're remembering truth. You're asking God for help. So you're going through scripture. You're praying. Hey, call accountability part. That could be, calling your dad, calling your mom if you're going through that, and then escaping that situation. So there's just lots of really practical tools as well that kids can learn, and you guys can take bits of it as what you think would be most practical for your family. But that would be the starting place, and if it does escalate, that's where looping in some counseling that with a CSAT, so a certified sex addiction therapist, could be helpful, or even other just biblical counselors that understand this topic. There's some counselors that aren't super familiar with this. You just want to kind of feel it out, make sure that they're on the same page as what you're trying to accomplish. There's some different pieces of thinking with this that you have to be kind of careful of, but not to talk too much into that.
So Freedom Fight, it's an app, and does the app have those tools that parents can download and say, hey, we're going to walk through this together? Like, talk to me more about what the app is and what the tool itself is.
Yeah, so there's two big categories of recovery things. There's blockers and reporting software. So you can think of classic Covenant Eyes, right? You go in and it sends those blurred screenshots, or it sends reports or things like that, right? It limits you from seeing pornography, which is one tool. And then there's if someone has escalated to a level of a habitual habit or addiction or just a deep struggle, and they're okay, I need to actually address the deeper things in my heart that are going on and understand why I'm doing the things that I want to do. That's where something like the Freedom Fight. So we're a website that also has an app / program. So you can log in on your computer or on your phone to the same place. And so we have essentially a few major areas. All of our tools and resources are all free in the app that you can log in for. Our 30-day challenge is free, that's what I would recommend if your child is struggling, it confesses it, you're not sure what to do. You, as the parent, should go first, download it, and start looking through it to get educated, to learn, and then you can walk through the pieces that you think would be best for you and your kid. And then just more holistically, Freedom Fight has lots of things. We have a 7-month program where groups of people can go through it. We've got a community where people can find accountability partners if you're 18 or older for that kind of stuff. But it's, holistic discipleship platform really to address this issue in particular. And so that's a little bit about what the Freedom Fight's about.
And what is your favorite software for blocking? You mentioned Covenant Eyes. I've dabbled a little bit with Canopy in our home, but what is going to be the best of the best, top tier, install this today at home?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's actually not one of those, would be my recommendation. So have you heard of whitelisting a device?
I've heard of it, but I don't know how to do it.
Basically, you go into your screen time settings as the parent for your kid, and you only allow certain websites. And so every other website that they try to access, whether it's a backdoor through an app, that's a huge issue, is people get on apps that link to the internet. And so even if you have something like Covenant Eyes on Safari blocked down, you go to this app that you didn't even know as a parent had internet access, it clicks in, and then you're backdoored, and you just circumvented that whole platform. And so my recommendation is doing the whitelisting for your kid as long as possible. And that's the conversation you can have with them. Hey, what are the websites you need? We just want to protect and put some boundaries around the internet that we are experiencing, right? We can't control everything, but this is something that's a real, the most solid step that you can really take. And so that would be my number one recommendation. If that's not an option, there's a few decent ones out there. I would say Canopy.
Doesn't Canopy do that? I feel like on Canopy, my son only uses an iPad really when we're traveling, or if I'm at a doctor's appointment or somewhere where it's I need him to be occupied. We don't use it just daily at home ever. But I have Canopy. I get frustrated even using his iPad because I can do nothing on it. And I have so much blocked. Is that different than whitelisting?
Yeah, it is. It's so for the person who's using it correctly, it's really good. And I don't know how much I want to share in terms of getting around it to protect some people that might be listening, that might be struggling themselves and didn't know. But there are ways around all those devices, especially on iPhones. It's the worst on iPhones, to be honest. But And that's why I recommend the whitelisting. Is it's just a fail safe.
Do you have a guide of how to whitelist? Like, I'm not tech savvy enough to really even know where to start. Like, is there a guide out there of how to properly do it?
It's about 4 clicks. So it's screen time, and then it's content restrictions or apps, and then but yeah, we can, I'll email you some steps after this podcast.
And can you basically set it to allow nothing and then just manually go in and add what is allowed? Or do you have to go one by one and filter out everything that's not allowed?
So that would be blacklisting, would be like, you don't want to go to Google. Okay, I put Google. Whitelisting is only allowed at websites. So if it's not on that list of 10, it's not going to go through your phone, essentially.
How is that different than the new Apple update that's coming out where phone, like they got a ton of press recently that they're doing something? It sounds similar to what you're describing.
I actually haven't heard or read all of it or tested the new one, but like, for example, Apple Maps or something, right? You click into a link from in there, that's going to pull up a default browser that's outside of a normal browser. And so there's just things you have to be careful. And
wait, so are you saying kids can access porn through Apple Maps?
yeah, exactly.
What?
Yeah, and I'm hesitant to share some of this just because of maybe some men that are watching. I'm trying not to cause a stumble here.
Well, I don't have a huge male audience. Like it's mostly moms. Like
Yeah, I mean, Reddit, Twitter, those things are the common ones. You know, the Notes app. I don't know if you've heard of all of those things with kids sharing notes that are deleting and all these. It's
what?
pretty. I'm just going to tell you that you do not, for all parents, and again, I'm not the one searching. This is coming from people in my groups who have just told me from their kids and things like that. But there's the ghost messages being passed where basically they send a message in a notes app, the kid responds, and then they remove it with a shared message after the confirmation. And so I would just go into the impression that you don't know how they're going to access. If they are actually trying to access it and look for it, right, that's a big deal. And so prevention-wise, on the front end is different, I think, right? Like, let's say your kids have never seen it. They know it's bad. They're not looking for it. Most of these other prevention mechanisms that you're doing are really great. But if we were kind of talking about in the nature of, hey, if someone's struggling, what are we going to do? We need to lock it down as best we can to get them healthy again. And then later we can slowly reintroduce and lower some of these boundaries as they are getting a stronger and stronger track record in their recovery.
My mind is actually blown. I mean, it makes sense though, right? Like if someone's trying to find it, like they'll find a workaround.
Yeah.
I just had no clue that like Apple Maps and the Notes app would be a tool for someone who's addicted to act. Like my mind is blown.
Yeah, sorry to loop you into all this craziness.
Oh my word! Oh my word!
But yeah,
no, it's so good for people to be aware. Like it's so important for there to be awareness of you can have all these lockdowns, which is why I love Greta Eskridge's work of you can have all the apps filtering things and all of that, but where there's a will, there's a way. And the enemy will find a way to allow this to happen. So it's not when to talk to your kids about porn. It's like now. Like you need to talk to them about it now. But then there's this whole separate conversation of, okay, we've now been exposed. There's an exposure in our home. How do we handle it? Would you say now that you've gone through what you've gone through, you're doing the work that you're doing, are you pro getting my kids a device as soon as possible, or are we are delaying a device as long as possible in this home? Like, where do you fall personally on that?
Yeah, definitely on the latter. So delay, and all the recommendations in your podcast have been just spot on. Yeah, especially with the social media and all. That's it's a huge piece, and It really is as much as you can go, as long as you can go, it's going to be better. And then introducing the boundaries in healthy ways. And so, like one of the things is eventually if you do get social media, maybe you still don't have private access, but you're allowed to access it in a public space with your parents in the room with you. And that there's only really specific things that they're doing. But again, as all the stuff that you've put out is all spot on, and I would 100% support.
Well, that's good to hear. We're doing our best, and I'm not an expert by any means, but I'm just trying to find the people that are and bringing them into the conversation.
And that's, I will say, one of the biggest issues, and I would say idols, that I don't use that word lightly. So part of my role, so I'm over all operations for the ministry. So I get to lead also the discipleship groups that are 8 months long. I'm taking guys through all of it. And so I just have a lot of guys who are struggling, and it's almost the same story every time. That they hesitate for so long wanting to get rid of the social media, and that is one of the biggest kind of drivers of their addiction. Further, is it's not necessarily that they're watching pornography on it, but they're feeding their mind so much stuff that is pushing them to want those types of things in their life. And so if they get triggered, and they eventually that's really the kickoff point for them wanting to go act out or wanting to go watch pornography. And so I really stay away from it a lot. I might get on social media around my wife once a month just to look at something, but I'm pretty much off of it completely. And it's more of just the kind of the nature of, if that's what I'm trying to help people get into and help people take those steps, that's kind of, it makes sense for me to follow through with that as well.
So it's not that there's pornography itself on social media, which I'm sure there is. It's more that it could be a trigger.
Yeah, there
it could be
definitely
the
is.
more, but which there is. I get that, but it could be more like a guy is following a fitness influencer and she's doing squats in a skimpy outfit, and that's going to trigger him to then go pursue actual pornography.
Yeah, exactly. That's like really condensed version. But yeah, that's exactly it. And even it's like movies you're watching, just all the things that right there. It's like what are we putting into what are we filling our minds with? And is it something that's holy, it's edifying, it's pushing us towards Christ, or is it is it pushing us the other way? And that's just a one lens to think through.
That could apply to so many areas. That could apply to movies, TV shows, music. I mean, there's music that I'm sure could be a trigger to someone. Books, like the list goes on and on of what we're allowing into our brains and into our children's brains. It's funny. I was talking to my mom this morning about Michael Jackson is making like a resurgence. I don't know if you're seeing this in any of like your work with students, but he has gotten so popular all over again, and it's reached my home. My kids are, who is Michael Jackson? We want to listen to his music. And I was kind of blindsided by it. I'm like, ugh, like I don't know. And so I had a long conversation with my mom this morning on it. And if you're looking through these decisions about the entertainment that your child consumes from the lens of, is this pushing them towards Christ or away from Christ? The answer becomes very clear on what we're going to allow them to consume. And sometimes I feel like I'm a little bit of a wet blanket because I'm like, no Michael Jackson and no Moana and no Harry Potter and no all these things. But gosh, if you look at it through that lens, is it pushing me to Christ or away from Christ? Is this going to be a trigger for an addiction, either that's in my own life or my child's life or a friend's life? Man, it just makes you really look through things so differently.
Yeah, 100%.
How does a parent that's sitting here listening today start facilitating an environment where their child is 100% comfortable coming and confessing to them and walking through this with them, versus an environment where they're confessing to a friend or someone who might not be equipped to help them walk through this?
Yeah, I think that's a really great question. So we always recommend this term called de-shaming the topic, right? You're probably familiar, you've talked through it, but hey, how can we introduce this conversation, frequently and in small chunks over time? And so like we've talked a lot about Good Pictures, Bad Pictures, which is a great book. It's a great first step. And then normalizing just the conversation about that, addressing, I thought, listen to the podcast where you talked about when they encounter the person who's transitioning, and how the conversation went with the kids. Like all of those are really great steps, just talking about sexuality. I would also say talking about what is God's promise and what does the scripture say about our sexuality, about sex in general, who's it designed for. And so the more that we can do that and fill in the gaps and questions that our kids have, right, the less likely they're going to be to go to someone else to answer them. Because if we don't answer them, it's a surefire way for them to go somewhere else to feel, oh, hey, we just don't talk about that in my family. And so I don't feel safe enough to go do that. And so I'm going to go tell my friend who we've had conversations about sex or people that we like or things, and so that would be really the first steps, I should say, is how can we talk about it more? How can we share what God's truth is in this area? Why is it important? And then what can we do to, just have those conversations frequently, but not, doesn't have to be this big sex talk all the time, right? It can just be, when they ask questions, you just answer them truthfully. That's, one of the really practical ways that we can do that.
I like to say have 1,000 1-minute conversations.
Yeah.
It's not this big sex porn sit down. While sometimes that is justified and needed, the more effective route is 1,000 1-minute conversations over the course of their childhood, that you're just constantly dripping down wisdom and discipleship to them in bite-sized chunks. That's at least the approach we've taken and we've found to be the most effective. What is one thing you wish somebody would have done for the 11-year-old you that you believe could have drastically changed your story?
That's a great question. I think sharing just the truth about what could be to come, that's just, hey, what is this? And I don't blame my parents at all for the lack of, it was very new for them in this. And even though I wasn't raised really in a Christian house, but kind of on Christian values I don't blame them for my struggle. But I think it could have been helpful if somebody was, telling me and warning me, hey, it's not this big scary thing that we should never talk about, but here's the reality of what happens when people use pornography, and this is just the truth, right? It's going to impact your self-esteem, it's going to impact how you view people and how you interact with them, it's going to make you less happy, it's going to all these things that are truth, and I think that could have helped me just as more of a type A person of oh, this means this. Okay, I don't want to do that, right? Like that's just how I operate a lot of the time, and I think for me personally, that would have been helpful.
Sometimes it's as simple as 1 + 1 = 2.
Yeah.
If you do this, this will happen, and you don't want that outcome. And for some kids, it's as simple as understanding that. Others need more, but for some kids, it's as simple as just knowing the boundary, and they don't want to experience the consequence of it, so they'll follow that.
Yeah.
Well, where can people find Freedom Fight if this really resonated with a parent and they're like, I need this for my child, I need this for myself? Where can they connect with you guys?
Yeah, so the freedomfight.org, and there's a contact page, and if you send us an email and just ask for me or whatever, I'll get it'll be sent to me, and I can respond directly if you do want to connect or have questions or just anything like that we can be a resource for you guys. But our website has a ton of really great information on it. It's not just the porn recovery program. We've got a lot of things in there for parents. We have webinars, we have other resources, and then also I just want to say for the struggling parent, for you to lead your kids well, it's so important for you to get healthy as well. And just statistically, how many people, 78% of men, Christian men, are struggling with this. And so it's free to get started for yourself, and then you can take your kids with it as you're a couple steps ahead of them. I just want to encourage you with that as well.
Thank you for saying that, because I think that's something I'm so tunnel visioned on kids that I'm failing to recognize there might be a parent struggling with this. And we've touched on some of the romance novels and the erotic novels, but we've not touched as much on, if you are struggling with this, how to get support. So I really appreciate you saying that. We say over and over, character is caught, not taught.
Yeah.
Like if you're struggling with this, there's generational sin, but two, like even if it's done in secret, like the fruit of this struggle will impact your child. And so we have to be so aware of that as parents as well.
Yeah, Dr. Samuel Perry actually did a really fantastic study. He's from the University of Oklahoma. It was over 6 years with 3,000 people, and kind of the 4 big things that he found was that, man, if parents are using pornography, it's going to impact 4 major areas: their personal spiritual growth, their marriages, kingdom service, and godly parenting. And it just makes sense, right? If I just watch pornography, I'm feeling shame and guilt about doing that. I'm going to be less likely, less wanting to go have a hard spiritual conversation with my kids, right? That's just the reality of how this works, and so you're spot on with all of that. It's impacting so much more than just the one person that is struggling. It's really impacting the whole family and really the church at large.
Does Freedom Fight offer any, mentioned discipleship groups. Does Freedom Fight offer anything specific for women if they're struggling with romance novels, erotic novels, visual, like whatever the struggle might be? Is it for women as well?
So it's not directly right for those specific things, but I will say 10% of our users are women that sign up for our program. And we have online groups for women. And a lot of people that are going, or a lot of the women doing it aren't necessarily, it's not hardcore pornography, but it's all the principles for these addictions are very similar, right? Hey, we need to understand our shame. We need to understand the trauma. Why, what lies am I believing? Hey, we live in a sexualized society. I need to learn how to walk in holiness. I have an addicted brain. I need to address that. I have these negative emotions that are coming into my life that I'm just being dominated by. I don't know even what they are or how to deal with them. And so there's just so much overlapping that I would say, yes, it does work, and it does apply, because a lot of our tools that we're teaching aren't just about pornography. It's like one of our main things is it's really just an emotional growth tool, helping people understand why they're doing the things they don't want to do through what's called a daily check-in and a faster scale. And so it's, it would be great for actually everybody to go through it so people understand, hey, when these things are happening, this is how I'm reacting instead of responding. And so Freedom Fight's for anyone struggling with pornography or other unwanted sexual behavior. And so that would kind of loop in all those things.
So good. Thank you so much for the work that you guys are doing. I know it's going to impact, I'm sure it's impacted so many lives already, but as this continues to be a struggle taking hold on our society, I know it'll continue to impact lives. So thank you. I ask every guest this at the end of each episode. At Raising Rock, we have 4 core values: respect, obedience, courage, kindness. Which of those values jumps out at you, and how can you encourage someone to walk in that characteristic today?
Yeah, no, that's great. I think I would lean towards obedience. Hebrews 12:1 is kind of our missional verse. Is, therefore, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles, and let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us. And so it's a hard work to throw off the sin that's entangling so many people, and we're trying to be obedient to the Lord to be able to run the race that He has for us, and we're having to put off that sin that's in our life. And so I really do think it's a big act of obedience to walk in this.
Amen. What a great place to end. Thank you so much, Andrew, for your time. This episode is going to impact so many. I can't wait to hear what it does in people's lives and the way the Lord uses it. So thank you for what you've done.
Thank you, Elise. Appreciate it.
If this episode encouraged you, would you consider leaving us a 5-star review on Spotify, Apple, or YouTube, or wherever you are listening? Drop us something in the comments, leave us a note. It means so much to hear from you. And every time you engage with our content, it really does help us become more discoverable to a new audience. So thank you for engaging with us. Thank you for watching us. And as always, we'll see you next Tuesday at 11 a.m.